Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you here. My name is Kristen, and I'm on the marketing team here at CloudCheckr. First things first, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants afterward. You can also access all of our webinars and register for new ones at cloudcheckr.com/webinars. You'll also see a couple links attached to this webinar today. One is to our free CloudCheckr trial, as well as a link to N2WS's free trial. You can ask questions throughout the webinar today using the question form on the screen. We may not answer them right away, but we'll address them at the Q&A at the end. Now, let's get things started. We are lucky enough to have cybersecurity expert Ian Thornton-Trump and N2WS engineer Laurent Mombel joining us today, along with our CloudCheckr specialist, Todd Bernhard. All attendees who are watching live today will receive $50 in AWS promo credits. You will get an email afterward with a link to access them. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ian now to give a short introduction.
Great, and thank you so much. Now, this webinar is a completely amazing, value-packed edition, and originally I had a lot more time to do this presentation than we now have, so we're going to use our magic powers and essentially compress time today to get in as much of the information as we can. So if we can get to the first slide on our deck, we're going to start into kind of me painting an overview, if you will, of what is going on right now with businesses, with the cloud, and kind of where these next generation products and services are going to be positioned. So today we just are kind of doing some scrolling with the slide deck, and hopefully we can get this onto the right slide. I'm just going to hit the forward button here, folks, and get us down to this slide to start my piece off. Perfect. So we definitely are going to talk today about demystifying migration to the cloud, really trying to understand the security risk and downtime associated with cloud, and of course, some understanding of the cloud costs and where they hit a business today. So I like to approach the discussion around cloud as really understanding what we can describe as the 5 stages of cloud grief, with we can't move our business to the cloud, followed by the cloud can't do what we need, followed by maybe we can revisit it next year, and then all our competitors have cloud projects, eventually resulting in acceptance that we have to move to the cloud for competitive reasons coming on. Now, one of the biggest concerns that people have when they talk about cloud are the unpredictability of costs. In fact, in a recent poll, 90% of all organizations surveyed identified concerns about using the cloud, and really that almost 40% of those organizations surveyed listed the unpredictable costs as a pain point. Now, what's interesting about this is that the migration issues itself are really, I'm going to say, difficult to discern, because on one side, we have C-level executives believing that their organizations have migrated workloads to the cloud, but the actual practitioners, about 35% of them, believe the same. So what we have right now is a bit of a crisis in an organization, and I think in a lot of ways this is because the idea of cloud is a little bit ephemeral in that we're not sure exactly what that definition is. So this delta, as I like to call it, is a dangerous situation for both the IT directors and the C-level executives. So right off the bat, we have a bit of a communication gap around the state of cloud affairs. But this is really interesting to me, is that 50% of companies right now are committed to this hybrid approach. So the combination of on-premise and cloud workloads. And as we get into this webinar, you'll see that perhaps that may be one of the reasons why we've never been so vulnerable. So when we look at the needed security skill sets or skill sets for cloud, right at the top is the cloud security, and this is one of the reasons why both N2WS on the BCDR piece as well as CloudCheckr are really focused on these issues that all businesses, so again, this survey information is talking about all the businesses that are looking at cloud and issues related to cloud. So one of the reasons why this is so pertinent and this type of webinar is so important for your business is that if you listen to Cisco, everybody's moving to the cloud. This astonishing statistics coming out of Cisco that by 2021, 94% of the workloads and compute instances will be processed by cloud data centers. That is astounding, as is the 75% of the total cloud workloads will be software as a service. So this is really interesting. So we can see the migration of applications that used to be client server in a business are going to the cloud and then are becoming software as a service installations for various businesses. And interestingly enough, we're seeing a decline in renting a server and moving to more interesting platforms such as elastic workloads like Elk, as well as those workloads that are based in Docker and its sort of serverless applications. So a lot of really interesting next-gen stuff coming out of Cisco. Now, this is where I kind of get to rant at us folks in IT security for a while. And this is also why when you're thinking about cloud and cloud security, you're going to quickly come to the conclusion that the traditional tools that we have had in place, the layered security that we have had in place, has been failing us, okay? And what's interesting is that when we look at the survey data coming in from the Barclay Group, we see that a lot of the security stack that we have in place, unfortunately, has been failing us with the success of endpoint security being the highest at 52%. So the question really remains is, if layered security hasn't done very much to stop the bad guys, and now your IT department is tasked with moving stuff to the cloud, and little investment has been made in thinking about the backup DRBCP plan for the cloud, as well as the security of the cloud platform and applications itself, we are created the perfect storm. And this is where I think the whole process of migrating from on-premise to the cloud has essentially doubled the attack surface for businesses. And I think there's a real double-edged sword that is beginning to cut and hurt, and that sword is really about the fact that the IT security tooling investment and the IT security training investment has really been focused on the traditional client-server LAN architecture and not really taking into the account of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. So the bottom line here is that when we look at the attack surface of your business and you're involved in cloud or cloud migration projects, some heed and budget needs to be allocated for tools fit for purpose. And I think that was really the big point that I had to mail today. So interesting enough, we're seeing an alignment with what C-level executives say and what the IT directors are saying, in that 31 to 60% of companies are reporting that their systems are cloud-based, and that the vast majority of businesses have only had a few years of experience with cloud solutions. And this is why I believe that moving to cloud without those security tools in place becomes a very dangerous situation. We've had about 25 to 30 years to figure out how to secure the local area network. Some companies are still struggling with that. Now you add in hosted services and the wide variety of different hosting platforms from Azure to AWS, and we now have a really difficult situation. So why is cloud attractive? Cloud is attractive because of the simplicity and speed of implementation. if you've ever been waiting for a vendor to ship you parts for a server, or if you've bought a number of infrastructure pieces and you're now waiting 3 to 4 weeks, and then there's delays, and then there's storms, and there's all of these other things that hurt your project timeline, you can understand why spinning up an instance in Amazon or in Google all of a sudden becomes a lot easier for the business to accomplish, get those workloads in place. And I also think that when you look at the larger mid-sized companies, you're really seeing an effort to modernize a lot of the legacy IT environments that they've built, realizing that the tin in data center is expensive, and it's expensive to replace. So I think that when we look at the value of cloud, companies can see a lot of synergies from large and small around that modernization, and also the ability to add capabilities and features to really move faster in the market with innovative either technology development or new services that they're trying to bring to market. So the real question now becomes, how do we deal with the issues related to platform as a service, SaaS, and IaaS? The issues really are around, and again, when we see the statistics, we've only had about 1 to 5 years of doing this. We have seen publicly exposed data. And this is one of the things where just having a utility that can check to make sure that you're secure, to make sure that the S3 buckets have the proper permissions on them, and to monitor that situation really allows you to be robust in your security posture and not jeopardize your compliance. The other issue, too, is that we're seeing hackers break into desktops and then rapidly move to exploit the hosted services. We just saw this with the time hop data breach, where a development workstation didn't protect their cloud credentials with two-factor authentication. The bad guys got onto that development workstation and quickly exfiltrated 21 million records from hosted infrastructure. So we need to understand that the platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and software as a service are very different environments, okay? Attack surface in these is really around the configuration management and build hardening, as well as making sure that, we're controlling access to that particular data. And it really becomes a battle about understanding where the detection of anomalous activities, the detection of suspicious network traffic, and really understanding how vulnerability management and credential management really protect your environment in the cloud. This is somewhat different from the internal LAN environment, where you have a lot more granular control over the segmentation of your environment. And so one of the things that we have that is leading to account compromises is the access keys not being rotated. The best practice recommendations is to rotate access keys every 90 days. Make sure that organizations, I think, are getting the message that root user activities are a very bad idea. So we're seeing actually a decrease in the amount of root type of accounts that are set up. And then really that the organizations that are suffering potential account compromises, this is becoming the new attack surface, poorly securing those credentials or those certificates for the management of your infrastructure. So what are the fixes? Well, a lot of this has to do with changing the perception from the old ways we used to do business and looking at the new ways to do business. And this is really about controlling those root accounts, multi-factor authentication on all the privileged user accounts for your infrastructure, the forced periodic rotation of the keys, ensure unused accounts and access keys are disabled, and absolutely be watching for suspicious behavior at user and network layer. Okay? When we think about the on-premises situation, we really understand that the relationship with on-premise is a really hard one to break, because you're stuck between paying and supporting the current infrastructure while building the new infrastructure. And the problem, too, is that if you have issues and problems that you're just trying to migrate to the cloud, you may end up just putting those issues and problems into the cloud. So one of the biggest things that you can do is when you do the P2V, the physical to virtual, for goodness sakes, build a staging environment and make sure that you're starting to apply cloud security best practices right from the beginning, rather than migrating servers into the various services that Amazon features and not having a plan to put security in front of that effort, rather than trying to apply security retroactively. So one of the other issues that businesses suffer from is migrating all the things, when the reality of the business is there is a tremendous amount of data dead weight in the organization. I think what I'm seeing is that having a plan to do an independent audit of the data that you need and the applications that you need, and then planning around moving that stuff into the hosted virtual environment is a much better approach than just trying to jam everything into a new hosted environment. So I think there's a lot of thought and planning that's required before you do the migration, and that includes the DRBCP plan for those services that you're migrating, and CloudCheckr. And of course, now is a great time to take a quick poke at TSB for their failure to really have a backup plan for their services migration. I think too that when we look at what the successful track record of businesses are, is really identifying those quick win strategies. One of the most important and easiest ways to move a business generally is to look at their email or collaboration tools first from the software as a service vendors, be it Google or be it Microsoft. A lot of success for firms have been moving away from on-premise Exchange servers and into Office 365. So there is great opportunity there. I think the other thing to give thoughts to is once those cloud workloads become critical, it's really important to secure them. So I think at this particular point in time, it's a great idea to introduce Laurent and have him start talking about more practically how you get AWS to provide that virtual hardware and what the shared security model looks like. So thank you very much. Over to you, Laurent.
Okay, thank you, Ian, here for this first part. So so let's talk about the AWS shared responsibility model. AWS is the oldest cloud, okay, the most secure as well. They have a lot of experience in security, and when you use AWS, you have a lot of security services such as security group for your instances. You have user management via the identity access management, etc. It's also the most compliant public clouds on the market. For example, it's the first one being compliant for the financial sector, and also for governmental organizations. For example, the UK government Home Office, use AWS. Okay. It's also fully compliant for GDPR. However, you have a shared responsibility. For example, AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, and customers are responsible for the security in the cloud. So, for example, if you were aware of the meltdown and Spectre issues that we had been talking about a few months ago, well, this is an AWS problem because they would have to patch their physical servers, for that. However, protecting your instances, such as having an antivirus running, a firewall, this is your responsibility. And obviously, backing up, protecting your data is your responsibility. So, why do you need to protect yourself in AWS? Well, very simple, because human error, anybody can go into your account, a user, and just delete an instance, for example, terminate it. You can also experience, sometimes pretty rare, but an availability zone or region failure. We've seen that last year in February, the region US East, so the data center US East being offline for 5 hours. Well, you need to take into consideration also any possible virus and ransomware, and also compliance and data security. Okay, so this is why you need to protect your environment in AWS. Sometimes you may have EBS failure, so which is pretty rare, but it's still something that needs to be taken into consideration. So I would say, what is the promised land? Well, the promised land in any environment is to have access 24/7 to your data. So by this, we mean flexibility, automated policies. We mean recovering in seconds, from any outages. These are ideal situations. No data ever leaves, your environment, or leaves the cloud. So have total traceability of your data, and a system that is easy, efficient, and effective. Okay, so this is what you should aim at when you work in the cloud. So this is where our product Cloud Protection Manager comes in action. It's a unique enterprise class product to do backup recovery and disaster recovery in AWS. And the idea really is to have a single pane of glass for all your backups and have everything all automatic. You don't want to get up at midnight, to create a snapshot manually, in AWS. So what is the promise then? Well, it's the promise of the cloud finally delivered with Cloud Protection Manager. So when something goes wrong, and I'm not even saying if, but when something goes wrong, you only have to click the recover button in CPM. So what we are providing is what is missing natively in AWS is a massive recovery button. And whereas in AWS you have to create volume from a snapshot, you need to mount this volume on an available instance, etc. We're giving you the possibility to do different level of recovery, and especially a total instance recovery with the same settings, and this in a matter of seconds. So another important point is disaster recovery. And you're going to say, why a cross-region disaster recovery? This is something we offer with Cloud Protection Manager. Well, I was saying earlier that region can be down, and that is really rare, but it can happen. But the beauty of working AWS, and especially with CPM, is that instead of having just one data center, if you were working on premises, you have access to 18 data centers around the world. No other clouds, I would say, and other solution can give you that. And with Cloud Protection Manager disaster recovery cross-region, you can benefit of recovering in those data centers. Now, we also have, or we include out-of-the-box support for MS SQL, MongoDB, Oracle, etc. We also have proper protection of Exchange, Active Directory, SharePoint on your EC2 instances, and this because for Windows instances, we work with the VSS service, or Volume Shadow service that runs on Windows Server. And we also provide the same application consistent for, I would say, Linux as well, and application running on Linux systems. So what we offer as well is the possibility for you to create a highly secure backup vault on AWS to protect from ransomware and malicious attack. So your account can become compromised. We've seen that happening in the past, but no worries, because you can just restore your whole production environment in another account, and this in a matter of minutes. So we've seen companies in the past, like Codespaces, running out of business because their account become compromised. So it's very important to be able to recover in another account whenever you have such an issue. And even Amazon nowadays is jumping on the bandwagon and encouraging people to have their snapshot in another account. They even came up with a buzzword recently on their blogs called isolation of blast radius. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but what Amazon is telling us is that you should always isolate some snapshots in another account. Well, if you combine both, cross-account disaster recovery or cross-region, well, you just build, your own highly secure backup data repository, and you can do that on different continents because you have access to 18 data centers. So it's pretty easy in a few clicks to have your data move, from I would say one continent to another, one data center to another, especially when you use our recovery solution. So what else can I tell you about CPM? Well, do you know what? Sometimes you may have end users coming to you and asking you, are you backing up those instances? Can we get a file or a folder from them? Well, this is something pretty common, especially if you have a dedicated file server or FTP server. And we're giving you a unique possibility to explore your snapshots, the snapshot created by a Cloud Protection Manager backup session, and to extract a file or a folder whenever you need. And this on Windows instances as well as Linux instances. And we also support encryption for backup and recovery. So if you have encrypted volume, so you can use file level recovery also on encrypted snapshots and volumes. So multi-tenancy, yes, indeed, we support multi-tenancy. And if you are, for example, an MSP providing support to different customers, or even an end user in the company that has several departments, you have the possibility to authenticate your AWS account in Cloud Protection Manager and backup from them. Okay, so no problem. Just go in our application, authenticate your account, and suddenly Cloud Protection Manager will have access to all the sources that you have, all your workloads, on your AWS account. You can even create independent users in Cloud Protection Manager that can just log in and just back up their own resources on their own AWS accounts. Nice and easy. So, at the end, what can we be afraid of when it comes to our workload in AWS? Well, to be honest with you, apart from an Earth-ending event, CPM will protect your data, and your data will be safe in AWS with CPM, because you have the AWS shared responsibility, the physical security provided by AWS, and the data protection via CPM. So, to summarize, what do we offer? Just to remind you, well, it's just a giant recovery button on the back end of your production. So resilience and knowing what to do no matter what happens. So you can safely migrate to AWS and also adapt, the future that the public cloud represents. And for example, from an MSP point of view, win a new prospect, back them up in AWS in CPM. If you have an end user, maybe moving to AWS to benefit of the flexibility of the public cloud without worrying about losing your data. Okay, really. So be ready for the future, be ready for the public cloud, and especially AWS. Now, just to tell you a little bit about some success stories. If you want some, I would say, testimony, just visit our website. We have some interesting case studies and customer testimony from very well-known companies such as Essilor, the #1 in glasses and lenses, Harvard University, or even Lancome on the MSP side. And recently we did a specific webinar about the University Notre Dame. So just to give you a few examples of what people are saying about Cloud Protection Manager. Well, Cloud Protection Manager is easy to deploy. It does the job, and you don't need to write your own scripts to create your own snapshot. So it solves one major issue that organizations have when they move to AWS. And this is true. The product is very easy to deploy in your own environment, and it runs on an instance in your own environment, so nothing comes out from the cloud. Everything stays in your own account. And at the end, it's a peace of mind, and that has no price, really. So CPM is simple. The dashboard gives us a fast look at the status of everything. So basically, Cloud Protection Manager becomes your single pane of glass for all your backups in AWS. And this is something that you don't get natively in AWS. And just to give you a third one, CPM really shines with instance recovery. It's automated and straightforward. Indeed, you can, in a couple of clicks, recover an instance anytime, everywhere you want. Okay, and if that is not enough, you can also restore several instances at the same time. And this is possible because we leverage the snapshot capability of AWS. Okay, so enough of me. I pass the control to Todd that will tell you more about N2WS and CloudCheckr.
Well, I'll say merci to Laurent, and thank you to Ian and Kristen. This is Todd Bernhard of CloudCheckr, and thanks everyone. So now we've heard a lot about backup and high availability and security, but if you're like me, you probably think, okay, how do I adopt these best practices without breaking the bank. And that's sort of where CloudCheckr gets in. Now, the promise of the cloud is very attractive. You pay for what you use and not a penny more. In reality, though, many resources are incorrectly sized or acquired, and then they go underutilized or even forgotten about altogether. Gartner, in fact, estimates that enterprises could be overspending by 70% or more, but there is a better way. There's a fundamental difference in how you approach utilization in the cloud versus in the data center. In the data center, you never want to operate above 90% efficiency because then you have no headroom for growth. When demand spikes, you exceed capacity and have a long formal process to add hardware. So you want plenty of headroom, which means spending more in advance, so you can operate at something like 10% of capacity. Now, by comparison, in the cloud, you always have room to grow, so you might as well use all of the resources you're paying for and run at something more like 90% of capacity. When running a business today, cloud spending could easily become one of the biggest contributors to your overall operational expenses. Automation lets you make changes quickly and frequently, allowing you the flexibility to experiment with different instance types, sizes, and configurations until you find the most cost-effective solution to suit your needs. In the data center, you may have experienced something called server sprawl. As organizations add more hardware to support their applications, it can quickly get out of hand. But in the cloud, we have cloud sprawl, and it can be harder to discover. You can walk around a data center and literally take inventory, but that's not possible in the cloud. The problem is that the cloud is so easy. It makes it so easy to add resources compared to physically purchasing and installing them in your data center. But that ease of use also makes it easy to overspend and lose track of what you've acquired. Amazon offers a ton of options, which gives you great flexibility, but that can also make it hard to decide. Again, Gartner Group did the math, and they came up with over 1.7 million possible permutations. In fact, Amazon has released more configurations since then, so this number should be exponentially higher. Now, of course, some of these decisions will be easier to make. For example, if you primarily do business in the USA, then you can probably rule out a lot of regions. And you probably have standardized on an operating system as well. But that still leaves tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of possible combinations to consider. The only practical way to make such decisions is through automation, and that's where CloudCheckr comes in. And when I was in high school, I had a poster like this one, and it was fun thinking of all the cool decisions I could look forward to. But as an adult, every day we make too many decisions. There's a phenomenon called paralysis by indecision. When you have too many choices, it can be overwhelming. Think of a huge menu at a restaurant like the Cheesecake Factory. I always get the same thing just to make my life a little bit easier, and I have some colleagues who do the opposite. They get a new item every visit, and they start it at the top, so eventually they will have had every dish once before they repeat anything. Now, I'm not saying which way is better, but either way, we've eliminated a decision and made our lives a little bit easier, whichever works for you. Now, they say you should not shop for groceries when you're hungry at risk of overbuying. The same applies to acquiring instances. Buying on-demand instances is the most expensive way to use the cloud, but reserved instances require long-term commitments of 1 year or even 3 years to achieve discounts and savings. So there are a lot of decisions to be made when it comes to reserved instances, and we'll look briefly at some of these. You've got to specify which brand of Linux or configuration of Windows, and so on. And you don't just request a computing instance from Amazon or Azure. You have to specify which kind based on your computing needs. Amazon Web Services offers computing devices that are optimized for general purpose use, computing, memory, graphics, input-output, or total storage. And within each type of instance, you can select a variety of sizes as well. And this is, again, not even an exhaustive list, as older configurations get retired, and you can expect newer models as well. To further complicate the cost of the cloud, instances can be purchased at different rates depending on how and when they are used. When left to individuals across different departments, teams, and business units, purchase decisions are less than optimal. You probably see this phenomenon already across your enterprise. When people book their own travel or when they buy office supplies at retail, they might not be leveraging corporate discounts that you've established. Willie Sutton used to rob banks because, as he said, that's where the money was. Well, the same is true for spot instances. That's where the savings are. You can save up to 80% compared to on-demand rates. But just like robbing a bank, there are no guarantees you'll get what you came for. You have to bid on spot instances like an auction in the marketplace, and you might not always get one. Still, spot instances can be a cost-effective choice if you can be flexible about when your applications run and if your applications can be interrupted. For example, spot instances are well suited for data analysis, batch jobs, background processing, and optional tasks. Now, a production-ready system is a system that is built with no single point of failure. The success of your business depends on such a system. A car obviously needs 4 wheels in order to function as intended. And what happens if one of those tires gets punctured by a nail, resulting in a flat tire? You're stuck. You cannot drive very far with only 3 wheels. However, this would not be the end of the world. You would either stop on the side of the road and change the tire yourself, or call a tow truck to do it for you. Ultimately, you'll have lost some of your time and possibly some money as well. But if a transportation truck, whose sole purpose is to move things around, had a flat tire, that lost time would result in a significant loss of business, which is why these trucks have double sets of wheels just in case such an event occurs. Of course, making this resource available has a price. And again, the cloud is no different. If you want to host your favorite cat picture website, you might not care too much if your site goes down for a while. But if you're hosting a mission-critical application, and each minute of service downtime results in a huge loss of income, which could easily add up to millions of dollars for some companies, you're going to design your solutions to survive failures and minimize the financial impact of an outage. And there are a number of ways which this can be accomplished, each of which has benefits and associated costs. To limit the possible impact of an outage in a single data center, you should make use of availability zones, or AZs. These are usually comprised of multiple physical data centers that are connected by a high-speed network connection, and they provide a certain amount of resiliency to your solution. However, this safety net is not free. Traffic costs are high between AZs and even higher between regions, and deployment becomes more complicated across multiple AZs, and database replication between regions can cause problems due to latency. Now, speaking of zones, at CloudCheckr, we created a free service called zonechecker.com, and you can see where the best coverage is for any particular cloud vendor. It's a free interactive map that lets you toggle on and off the major cloud vendors to see their coverage. Each circle is a region or city where that cloud vendor has one or more data centers or zones, with larger circles representing more zones. The zones have a high-speed interconnect between them so they can replicate data and fail over with low latency. You may have seen that commercial for an identity protection firm. They show a bank being robbed, and the uniformed officer says, "Oh, he's just a security monitor, not a security guard. He just tells you when you're being robbed." Well, that translates to the cloud as well. Monitoring is crucial, but you want more than monitoring. You need assessment and compliance to enforce recognized security standards and to prevent security problems. So there's a lot of acronyms floating out there, a veritable alphabet soup of terms. These are some of the more familiar and important ones. Depending on your industry, you may need to comply with one or more. Companies that sometimes see IT security compliance programs as being like a tax that increases the cost of doing business rather than as a competitive advantage. And this is unfortunate since compliance programs are created to produce a positive and productive outcome. Most compliance programs have goals like improving security, decreasing risks, improving quality and reputation, and managing the long-term value of an industry. In short, compliance can be a positive, and when a compliance tool like CloudCheckr also delivers cost savings, security is no longer a tax. It pays for itself, and then some. Now, you might have seen one of those witty bumper stickers that states, "If you think education is expensive, try ignorance." The same is true for security. If you think security is expensive, try getting hacked. Which leads us to, did you hear about that S3 breach? Well, actually, there have been several highly publicized S3 breaches in the last year and a half. confidential info from a GOP data firm, from Verizon, WWE, and Dow Jones. Now, all of these breaches could have been prevented if they used a tool like CloudCheckr. So companies with a compliance program in place can reduce fines and other repercussions, such as customer backlash and public opinion. After an incident or breach, it's not uncommon to hear of a compliance infraction or noncompliance with a standard, with truly negative repercussions. The good news is CloudCheckr just launched last month total compliance with 35 security regulations and frameworks automatically scored for your configuration. This is a powerful tool to stay secure and help with auditors. So we added these 35 compliance standards, including CIS, HIPAA, PCI DSS, NIST, SOC, and more. More than just a check mark, you'll see an actual score for each compliance standard, and those scores will be plotted over time. This is a great way to see, graphically, your progress towards various standards. And of course, like most CloudCheckr reports, you can export these as PDF or CSV. Now here's a look by the numbers, and you can see we have a lot of customers, but we have a lot more customers than frankly even we know about, because our service provider partners have customers of their own, and they simply change our logo and color scheme. So they don't even realize it, but they're using CloudCheckr. I call this our NASCAR slide, just a number of logos. CloudCheckr has a healthy global footprint, providing separate instances in AU and EU for those with data sovereignty concerns. And with that, I'll just remind you that there are three things you need to look for in a cloud management platform: security and compliance, cost and billing, and cloud management. And it's nice when you can have one solution that does all of the above. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. And Kristen.
All right, thank you, Todd, and a big thank you to Ian and Laurent for being here today. Again, right, if you guys have questions to submit, go ahead and send those in now. So let's look at a couple of the questions we've gotten so far. Ian, it looks like this one is for you from your slides a little bit earlier. What did you mean by crypto jacking? Would you be able to expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the traditional attacks that cyber criminals used to launch was essentially ransomware to elicit a ransom paid in Bitcoin. Now what the bad guys would like to do is either grab all your servers and make them crypto mine the currency, and I can talk a little bit about that and what is involved in that, but also poisoning any web services that you might have so that anyone visiting your website downloads a little JavaScript program to generate crypto coin for those bad guys. So there's two different types of attacks. Now, the one that's most devastating to businesses is the one where your infrastructure is taken over by bad guys, and usually over a long weekend, they spool up as many machines as they can, and they do all of this crypto mining, and then Monday before you get back into work, they destroy all of those machines, okay? And then the business may only find out that this has happened in 30 days when they get their next bill. Okay, and they'll go, oh my goodness, we normally spend $5,000-6,000 a month on Amazon. We just spent $60,000 on Amazon, and the bad news is a lot of digital evidence is completely gone. So this is why monitoring that infrastructure becomes really important. The issue with an unsecured website also becomes one of more of a corporate liability issue and embarrassment, because you don't want to be perceived as having poor security, but the fact that you're kind of infecting everyone that visits your website with this crypto miner is also really bad news. So what we know is that criminals can leverage the hosted infrastructure of a business in many different ways.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So, Todd, this one will be directed at you. When you say compliance check, does that give recommended actions?
Great question. Thank you. And I didn't want this to be too much of a product pitch, but happy to answer questions if you have specifics. And yeah, in fact, not only can CloudCheckr tell you what you're doing wrong or what vulnerabilities it's identified, it can give you detailed help to fix it. But what's really cool is our self-healing automation capabilities. So there'll be a button that says Fix Now, and you can literally click that button, and it will fix the vulnerability that it identified. You know, even if you know how to fix it in AWS, you don't have to leave our CloudCheckr to go to the AWS console. So that alone is a great time saver, really cool, reduces human error. But what's really cool is there's an Always Fix button. And with Always Fix, what that says is whenever CloudCheckr detects that vulnerability, even if you're asleep, if you say Always Fix, CloudCheckr will detect it and fix it and send you an email. Hey, I found this S3 bucket was public. That's against your compliance best practices. Don't worry, I fixed it, and you're the hero. So that's really cool stuff, really powerful, and we have quite a few automation tools in there. And there is a workflow option for that. So if you're a little apprehensive about that, you could instead have a request fix button, and then that goes to your manager or your coworker who's a little more seasoned, and they say, yeah, I agree with that. Let's click Fix Now. Or they could send it back and say, no, I meant to do that. It's for testing. So great question. Thank you.
Okay, and Laurent, it looks like we can hand this one over to you. What are some of the advantages of N2WS as an AMI solution instead of a SaaS solution?
Okay, so basically, our product Cloud Protection Manager runs on an instance. Okay, and this instance, you're going to get it from the AWS marketplace, and you're going to launch it in your own AWS account, environment, and region. Okay, and basically all the metadata created by the backup sessions, you know, but even the I would say the parameters and settings, all this is stored on that particular instance because the application runs on that instance. Okay, and this is your instance. We don't have access to it. You can manage it the way you want. So automatically it makes the solution much more secure and also compliant because nothing comes out from the cloud, nothing comes out from your account. You have full traceability of the metadata related to your backup session. Okay, and this is obviously it makes sense automatically that it's a more secure and compliant solution because when it comes to a SaaS application, you don't know where it is hosted, you don't know who has access to it. You see, so it's a huge issue, yeah, especially in AWS, I mean in the cloud, and there. And with I would say GDPR, it's much less compliant than having total control of the application and the instance where it's running on.
Great. Thank you, Laurent. And speaking of compliance then, does CloudCheckr help with GDPR compliance checks? Todd?
Thanks. Great question. So we just came out with total compliance a month ago. We announced it at the AWS Public Sector Summit in Washington, D.C., and I was there. And our initial batch, we've had the Center for Internet Security, CIS benchmark, for over a year. We just came out with HIPAA, and then we've added 33 more to bring us to 35. So the short answer is we don't have GDPR in there yet, but it's just a matter of time and getting that work done. But we just came out with 35 checks, and you know, we're really excited about it, and we expect to add GDPR and anything else they come and throw at us. So good question.
Great. And let's see here. Is it possible to recover many servers at the same time with CPM, and how?
Okay, I suppose that's a question for myself. Yes, it is. Okay. The beauty of a CPM is the fact that it leverages the snapshot capability. So I'm pretty sure if you worked in AWS, you know, previously, you noticed that you can select several instances, right-click, and then start in the same time those instances. Well, for the recovery, it's the same thing. Because we leverage the snapshot capability, you have the possibility with CPM to recover several instances at the same time. And even better, we have an API CLI or command line that enables you with one command the recovery command to list, all the instances you want to restore in case of disaster, and where you want to restore them. Okay, so you can really prepare, for disaster recovery. You could create a little batch file, with this command and the list of instances you want to recover, and just run it anytime, from the laptop you use to access CPM, in order to recover, a few instances or all of them in, for example, your disaster recovery region or your disaster recovery account.
Great. Okay. And Ian, it looks like we'll give this one to you. In AWS, security is a shared responsibility model. The infrastructure is AWS responsibility. Is it possible to do a pen test?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Pen tests and vulnerability scans are part of the robust security, especially looking at your external attack surface. You do have to go through a process of getting the AWS account holder to ask AWS for permission to get a pen test. And I know it sounds a little silly because certainly the bad guys are not asking for permission to attack your AWS infrastructure. But Amazon just wants, I think, the heads up and some control because it is shared infrastructure. And I do know that the smallest micro machines that Amazon currently offers, you cannot vulnerability scan them. I think it's just due to the fact that they might be very sensitive in terms of load, and they don't want to cause downstream problems for other users because of that shared responsibility model. But as a best practice, I say have at her.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And Todd, how does CloudCheckr compare to competitors on features and cost?
Great, and I noticed there were some other questions too about pricing, so I'll try to compile my answers to all those into one. CloudCheckr offers really two main elements that most customers like. We do the cost savings and optimization, all the identifying of idle resources, unused resources, wrongly sized resources, and so on. And that's where we typically save customers about 30% on their cloud spend. And then we also offer the security and compliance. So most competitors only offer one of those two things. And, so that would mean two different companies to work with, two different screens to have to deal with on a daily basis, training on two different platforms, and so on. So not only that that's how we compare to them. On pricing, we're cheaper than either of them for one of those solutions. So you can go right to our website. Most competitors don't list their pricing, but we know it. We are 2.5% of your cloud spend at the most. Other competitors start at 3%, so already we're less. But you get automatic volume discounts the more you spend. So you could, if you spend a lot in the cloud and you're willing to commit to a year, you can get that percentage down to 1.35%. So it's pretty dramatic and very affordable when you consider we're going to probably save you 30%. So you get an ROI almost in a matter of days. So good questions. And there also was a question about how is it licensed. So it's available as a software as a service model, right? We're a cloud-first company, and so you just provide your credentials. They can be read-only, but if you want to take advantage of the automatic self-healing, then you need to make it read-write. But it's available as software as a service. But we're also available as an AMI, Amazon Machine Image, that you can run in your own cloud infrastructure. And that's how we're able to be in. We're the only vendor of our kind in the government secret region, which is an air-gapped, disconnected from the internet environment. So you have your choice, and you can go to Amazon Marketplace to learn more, or cloudcheckr.com/pricing to learn more. And I'll turn it back to you, Kristen.
Okay, thank you, Todd. And it looks like we have time for one more question. What is the difference between backing up AWS environments using traditional agent-based backup in comparison with CPM?
Okay, so I suppose that's a question for me, Laurent here. So basically, there's a huge difference. Okay, Using traditional agent or traditional backup products, agent-based, is counterproductive in AWS. The reason for that is because when you install an agent, let's say on an EC2 instance, Windows or Linux, basically there's going to be, first of all, deduplication. Okay, so basically the action of taking the data and putting it in a format that is efficient to send via the internet to a storage node and to store on a storage node. Okay, on top of that, you may want to add encryption and compression. So this takes time. Okay, first of all. Secondly, it's counterproductive because you're taking the data outside the cloud very often, outside AWS, or even just outside your AWS account, which makes automatically this backup solution, I would say, less compliant with GDPR, when it comes to traceability. Okay, creating snapshots in AWS takes seconds. So this means that if you use CPM, okay, and you create backup session, you'll be able to run a backup session in matter of seconds. Okay, because it only takes seconds to create snapshots. And you'll be able also to restore in the matter of seconds. Okay, there. Average is about 30 seconds to restore an instance. Okay, there. So, and on top of that, your snapshots will be located in the snapshot section of the service. So, for example, in EC2, all the snapshots at the end created by the backup session of CPM will be located in the EC2 snapshot section. So, you know where your data is, your backup data, and at the end, you can use those snapshots to recover very quickly. Okay, so this is why the traditional methods of installing an agent on an instance is counterproductive in AWS.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. And that looks like all the time we have for today. Again, thank you so much to N2WS, Ian and Laurent for joining us, and Todd, who's calling in from AWS New York this week. Be sure to check out the links that we've attached for our free trials today, and look out for an email coming soon for those AWS credits for our live viewers today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.